pen and fill the paper with the message that it wants to send.
Hello, welcome to the Aviatrix Book Review. I'm Liz Booker. My guest today is a former aviation mechanic who has woven her experiences from the hangar into fiction. Her book, Murder in Plain Sight, the first fiction book of the year for the Aviatrix Book Club, is a murder mystery thriller that had me on the edge of my seat. You can find her at her website, Facets of a Muse. Julie Holmes, welcome.
Hey Liz, glad to be here.
So now let's talk about writing. Tell me a little bit more about your journey to publication and how you developed your writing as a fiction writer.
The development as a writer, I think, is a lifelong journey. And I think it begins, and if you ask any writer, they will say that they read voraciously, especially when they were a kid. You read everything and anything, you read all kinds of stuff. And that's what I did. And when I was in elementary school, I wrote, I don't know why I decided I had to write a story, but I did. And so I wrote something that will never see the light of day again. It's it's got the hero girl, it's got dragons and unicorns. So, go figure. I spent a lot of time writing, even in college, even through high school, into college. And I didn't have any formal education per se in writing, outside of what everybody takes in high school. I didn't take any special. In fact, I tested out of English comp, freshman comp, when I went to the U. So I didn't take any formal classes until I think after the kids were born, because I was writing and I started writing short stories, submitting them for publication, and I got 2 of them accepted, and then I had kids. That's and then pretty much everything writing just kind of shut down because you have something else that needs your attention. I think I still puttered a bit, but for the most part, I didn't do any writing. After that, after the kids got a little bit older, I started writing again, like I said, with my mom passing away was kind of the not the wake up call, but if you're going to do this, now's as good a time as any. Get your butt in gear. So I started with Nano, rewriting one of the stories that I had written in college. I started I was a member of a site called fanstory.com, and there were a few of the members that offered like classes. And so I took some of them. I was very fortunate in other writers giving me advice and helping me with bits and pieces along the way. And when I got enough confidence, I did take official online writing classes, which I really enjoyed, and I learned a lot. But it's a lifelong, it's a learning. The whole thing is learning. You practice, you learn from other writers, you practice some more, and you learn from other writers, and it's a vicious circle.
How long did it take you from the inception of this idea to publication?
5 years, maybe. I mean, initially, when I wrote the story, it wasn't set at the airport, and it wasn't about airplanes. It was about a character who was an airplane mechanic that inherited a house out in the middle of nowhere, out in rural Minnesota. And as I wrote that story, I drafted it through during Nano, and I looked at it, I went and read through it, that little subconscious part of me that paid attention when I was in my writing classes said, that's 2 stories. You can't do it. You can't do it this way. So once I realized that, it's 2 stories, and I split it out, I took the character because of an aircraft mechanic. Well, you got to have it at the airport. But silly me, the next iteration using the character wasn't even set at the stupid airport. It was set at a construction site by the airport. And I got through the draft, and I was reading through the draft, and I could hear my writing teacher's voice clear as day in my head. Why is she at the airport? Why is she there? Why is she not at the airport? And it's like, oh, duh, of course. And so from that, then it morphed into, the crime actually on the airport grounds, et cetera, et cetera. So
Do you
it's,
consider yourself to be a pantser or a plotter?
yes.
You're not clearly in one camp.
No, I, especially with the first books that I've written, I've plotted them all in my head first. And I really initially, everything was laid out in my head. So all I had to do was put it on paper. Then I got to the point where I had to write down timelines because I get confused. And so I, different events and when they happened. And, but it's fluid enough that I can change it on the fly. I'm not a rigid outline person. And sometimes things happen, as you know, in the story. So I consider myself a sort of almost plotter, but not really, but sort of.
You just kind of led me into the next question, which is how on earth did you keep all of the details straight for this story?
Honestly, I don't know. Which is a wonderful thing to say to somebody who's trying to figure out how to write this stuff. Um, I have a character Bible, which where I keep track of all the details for all the different characters from Sierra and Quinn to
Is it,
Officer Stanford.
can I ask you, is that a handwritten Bible
No,
or is that, okay, so it's electronic.
it is electronic. I read, it's Karen Wiesner has a book called First Draft in 30 Days. And at the end of the book, she's got a kind of worksheets. And so what I did is I took those worksheets because she uses those when she does her plans, her books. And it's really good because it takes you through the characters, it takes you through the setting, it takes you through plotting and yada, yada, yada. And so I duplicated those in Microsoft program OneNote because it worked for me. A lot of people, you do what you do. So it's gotten to the point where I just use that mostly for the character and the setting and the research, tracking all that. The actual story, I've gotten to the point where I write it longhand simply because the process of writing it seems to encourage the creativity. And so I
Yes,
have these
yeah.
notebooks where I write the scenes, the sequence of events. I'll write it and write it, write it. And then as I go through, I make notes and then I start over and I do it again, kind of trying to refine it. And so it, and that's how I keep track of the days and other things. I also use Scrivener as opposed
Yeah,
to Word.
me too. I love Scrivener.
And and I can track, keep track of which scenes are on which days and stuff like that way. But as for, what what clues, what happens here, what happens there, honestly, a lot of that's mental. It's in my head. I don't know how I can keep track of it. Maybe it's all those mysteries that I've read over the years.
I noticed that you kept the tension very high in this
Mhm.
book. How do you keep that tension high? What are the craft devices that you're using to keep that pacing and tension?
Well, first I try to keep my chapters short. I mean, I try to keep my chapters around 2,000 words or so because it's short enough that you're gonna, it's, I don't know how many pages it ends up being, four or five pages or so. I don't know, but it's short enough that when you read it, it's like you go flip over to the next chapter. It's like, oh, it's only a couple pages. I'll just keep on going. Oh, it's just a couple pages. So that's one trick. Another another trick is trick. Another device is the questions. Is the posing the questions. In the first chapter, she remembers a trauma, but the reader has no idea what it is. She has a scar, but the reader doesn't know where she got the scar. And the reader knows that her brother died, but the reader doesn't know how he died or when. He died 9 months ago, but they don't know how. And so there's that, those questions the reader wants to find the answers to. So that's part of it. Same thing with the end of the chapter. They say cliffhanger. And at the end of the first chapter, she sees what the body in the hellhole. And so the reader wants to, okay, so what happened? So you're drawing the reader on that way. However, you can't put a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. Whereas, so now you've got your reader questions. You still have the question in each chapter. You don't necessarily end with a cliffhanger. So the reader wants to find out, okay, so what happened? So what is that? Where did she get the scar? What trauma did she have? You know, what happened? Who's the dead body? Nobody knows who the dead body is. So that's a device especially used in mysteries and any other suspense to keep the reader going.
What's your schedule? How do you fit your writing in around your work?
I do my 8-hour day in the morning because that works for me in the morning. So I do my whatever I need to do in the morning. And what I try to do is the afternoon, sometimes I can dedicate to doing some writing, sometimes not, depends. But usually after supper, I dedicate 2 hours. I'll sit in the bedroom because that's the only good place I have to write right now. My goal is I try to keep up the nano habit of about 2,000 words during a session. I try to because it seems to be a good target, and I know I'll be able to finish the draft in less than 3 to 4 years. One of the things I did, and the best thing I ever did for my writing, is take a week-long, it was called Right by the Lake. It was a master novel writing class. And that class is limited to 6 writers at a high, and all the writers are at a higher level. They're higher level writers, as in almost, publishable kind of thing. And our instructor, and in that week, we bonded, the 6 of us. So we call ourselves the Writing Sisters. And that's one thing that we can do is if we have questions, if we want help and advice, once a year we get together for a reunion. Our reunion retreats. And that's one thing that we do is we submit 20 pages of whatever we're working on to each other, and we go through it and critique it and offer ideas and suggestions. And 2 in particular of my writing sisters for this book, we had video chats every few weeks. We would get on, and because all 3 of us were working on something, and so we would do an hour session helping each other. And each of us has a different strength. A couple of my writing sisters are really good at plotting. A couple of them are really good at seeing plot holes or character issues. And so when we need help, then we'll reach out to each other.
I did a 2-year master's degree program in which we were required to submit 40 pages of writing a month. And so when I left the program, my roommate and I really wanted to continue that structure. So we set ourselves up. So we have an open arrangement where we can submit to each other 20 to 40 pages every other week, and we will make ourselves available on the off weeks for a conversation about that writing. And we've been doing this for 4 years now, and we've both gone through ebbs and flows of our writing. But any time that one of us is on, the other one is available to read and give feedback. And so that's been really helpful for me. And it's even better when we are both like on it and are giving each other deadlines and accountability, because that, it's like a little bit of a competition. Accountability is huge.
Huge.
Yeah. And so, and then I have one other writing partner that I met up with a couple years ago, and we exchange our work too. And those relationships are so critical. It's very tight, it's a small circle. My work isn't ready for prime time, and we understand where our drafts are in the evolution and what kind of feedback to give each other. So that's really helpful.
Right. And that's very valuable. And there's it's so fun. We take the whole week, the weekend when we have our reunions, and everybody gets their turn.
Do you have an agent?
Yes, I do.
And tell me about that relationship. How did you find your agent, and how does that relationship work for you?
I was, as writers do, once I had a manuscript I felt was publishable, you start querying agents and publishers and all that other stuff. And um, one of the best things that I did, and unfortunately they've ended the program, but it's called the Writers Institute that was held in Madison every year, every spring in Madison, Wisconsin. And that was sponsored by the Department of Continuing Studies of the University of Wisconsin, Madison. There were speakers, presentations, workshops, and agents. And they would invite X number of agents, a dozen agents or whatever, and you could sign up for pitch sessions with these agents. And so you sit down face to face with the agent, you get, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, and you pitch your book. And if they like what your pitch is, they'll ask you, send me X amount of pages, send me this, send me that. And that's what you do. That's how I got my agent. She is actually in Madison, but I pitched to her because she reps mysteries. And she was one of 3 agents I pitched to. And she was the only one that got back to me. She went on vacation. She said, "Don't send me anything for 6 weeks. I'm on vacation, yada, yada." So I sent it to her when she, after the 6 weeks, and she sent me an email back and said, these are the issues, or these are the things that I've found and that should be adjusted to make the story better. I'm be willing to talk to you on the phone about these changes, and I, want to revise and resubmit, that'd be fine. I'll take a look at it. But the key part of it was, if you want to talk about it on the phone, we can discuss the changes. The other thing she mentioned was, because you were at the Writers Institute, she sat down and took the time to write feedback, to critique the manuscript. So by attending the Writers Institute, I demonstrated that I was serious about writing.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump on that and mention some other resources, and you saw me like kind of looking down at my phone, because the Association of Writers and Writing Programs has an annual conference every year where they have those opportunities to meet agents, and where you can jump into workshops. And when you sit in on a workshop, like the ones that, either a small one or even when you go to a larger conference and you actually pay to participate, a workshop with an agent or a publisher, they will tell you that, if you in your query email mention in the subject line that you attended this event or this conference, that you will get looked at. And the same thing goes for in my world, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. If you want to write for children and young adults, you go to these conferences, you do this speed dating with the agents, you pay the little bit of extra for them to take a peek at your manuscript, because this gives you access. And then you can take that one step further with a graduate degree program like I did. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's what happened. And the thing is, it was really interesting. She said, "If you want to talk on the phone, I'm available." And it's like, really? Like, I'm going to turn that down to talk on the phone?
No matter what the outcome is, you're going to definitely take that opportunity for sure to get those feedback. Yeah.
Right. And so I looked at her critique, at her feedback, and I agreed with the things that she brought up. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So when I talked to her on the phone, as we were discussing, we went through, because she on her critique, we went through each item that she mentioned. And toward the end of the phone call, she said, "I would like to represent you." And I was like, "Oh." And I'm thinking, wait, let me fix this first and send it back, because once I'm done with it, you might not want to.
You didn't know that's what we were doing.
I mean, seriously. So yeah, so it's like, it wasn't the call, but it was the call, but it wasn't. And so that's what I kind of said to her. So, well, let me fix this, revise it and send it back to you. And then, but yeah, she offered to represent me. And so I signed with her. We went through some revisions on the story, even after the ones that she had critiqued. And then she started chopping it. And she'd hit maybe 10 editors, publishers she thought would be interested in it. and they all really liked it, except, well, no, she was a flight attendant. And
Oh,
yeah,
boo.
and
I
that's what my
mean,
agent said.
nothing against flight attendants
Right,
at all.
right,
I mean, they're absolutely part of the crew. But really, you have
the, the
a mechanic?
right,
Like, how
right,
unique does that get?
right. And my agent said, yeah, no, we're not changing that, because that was the kind of the whole point, was that it was a different protagonist. And I think what the publishers were struggling with was, how do you market it?
Yeah,
That
who's going to
was how
identify with this? Well, lots of
exactly
people, actually.
right. Yeah. And yeah, so I made a few more changes that she suggested, and then she went and found the publisher for me. So, and then she negotiated the contract, which was really nice. And she, a little bit later on, sold the audiobook rights to an audiobook publisher. And so that was really nice that she made sure that I retained those rights so that I could take them elsewhere. So she's fabulous. That's all I can say. She's awesome.
That's great. And so, how does book publicity work for you?
Not very well.
Is that a function of
I
your
mean,
publisher, your agent, or is it like, I mean, I'm hearing that it's pretty much all on the author these days.
it is. It is. And granted, my publisher is a small publisher. I'm not published with one of the big five, very small publisher, and the other, my publisher was absorbed from the time I signed the contract to the time I published. They were absorbed by a different publisher. But because it was a small publisher, I expected to do all the marketing, because they don't do that anymore. They don't have the budget for it. And even the big five, unless you got a name, they probably aren't going to do a whole lot for you. But
Well, so
yeah,
let's take a second then and help me with this. So, if I'm a fiction writer in the adult world, there are definitely reasons to go with an agent and a traditional publisher in the children and young adult world. But in the adult world, and I'm a writer, why would I then go with a traditional agent and traditional publisher route as opposed to self-publishing?
by going the traditional route, and some of my writing sisters have self-published, and so I kind of have an idea what they went through. And I also have writing sisters who are published that don't have an agent. With the traditional publishing, you have an editor that you don't have to pay. You have a cover designer you don't have to pay. You have distribution that you don't have to worry about, because they'll distribute it to the major distribution, the two big distributors where the bookstores look to get their books, where the libraries look to get their books. It's not Amazon. It's the wholesalers. So there's that. They put together a sell sheet. Of course, I gave them all the material for the sell sheet, but the sell sheet is if you're going to a bookstore and you come in and you can give them that sheet and say, would you like, could you please carry my book? And then they've got all the information right there, what they need on their end. Whereas self-publishing, you pay for your editor, and that can be quite expensive depending on the editor and depending on the book. You design your own cover, whether your daughter is a graphic artist, that's cool, or you pay somebody else to do it, or you do it yourself. But people who do that for a living are the ones that really know how to do it. So you're paying that. You don't have, as a self-published author, you don't necessarily have the avenue to the distribution network either. So that's what I see. I'm not getting the percentage of royalties that a self-published author would get. However, that doesn't bother me, because I know I'm not going to make any money anyways. Because unless your name is Nora Roberts or
Yeah,
James
we're not
Patterson, you're not going to make squat.
we're not in it for the money.
That's right.
Unfortunately.
Well, don't quit your day job. That's about it. don't quit your day job. This myth of the tortured writer quitting his job and running off to a tropical island to spend his time in front of a typewriter. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're not going to last very long.
What is your advice for aspiring and working writers?
Persist. The biggest thing is persistence. Keep moving forward. Don't give up. That's probably the biggest thing is don't stop reading. Keep on reading and read stuff that's you're not familiar with. Read stuff that you're familiar with. Don't stop learning. Constantly try to practice, take classes, find workshops and do that because every time you do, you're not only practicing, but you're absorbing the knowledge that somebody else has already gone through. Don't stop practicing. Practice, practice, practice. It's just like an athlete. I mean, you gotta write. Writing is practice, and find a critique partner, because you can't look at your own work and it may look great to you. You hand it to somebody else, and they're like, yeah, no, that's just not working. So that's so valuable to find other writers to work with, to give you a different perspective from a craft standpoint.
You blog about writing. Tell us about your blog.
Oh, Facets of a Muse. Yes, it's all one word, all in WordPress. Um, I started, and that's actually, it goes back to the marketing. Remember you asked me about book marketing, and that's part of, before I ever published, one of the gems of advice is don't wait until your book is coming out to do something. Do it ahead of time. So that's what I did. I started a blog because what else do you do when you don't have a book cover? You don't have a publisher. What do you do? So I started that, and I post every Saturday, and I mix my writing advice or writing things that I've discovered about writing with gardening in the summer, and then my awesome Australian ex-model muse shows up every so often to either write a blog post or interrupt me.
The fact that you're mixing it up with some personal stuff so that we get to know you, and then you're talking about writing, and sometimes you're talking about the book that you're working on, like that's what everybody suggests that you do as a writer, is like,
yep.
The dedicated readers want to know about you and who you are. So yeah, nice work.
Yep. And I would also post after one of the Writers Institutes. I would give a summary of the institute, and so interesting. The director of the institute, when the institute was over, she just linked to my page. She linked to my blog, and
because you did all the work for her.
Right. Yeah. Here's review, and just go over to her website and be done.
What a great way to get followers, though.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. And I can't wait for doing in-person stuff again, because that was a big part of networking and a big part of meeting readers and getting the name out there.
I'm looking forward to that for all of us, for a variety of reasons, not just for writing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about writing?
The only thing I would suggest for people who are aspiring writers or writers, anytime you have the opportunity to do a writing conference, to go to a writing conference, to attend, especially if they have workshops or classes, anytime you have the opportunity to take a class, whether it's an in-person class or an online class, for a particular part of the craft, whether it's characters, whether it's plotting, whether it's, anything, do it. It's a money well invested, money well spent. In fact, I'm finishing up a writing certificate. So it's not an MFA, but it's something. But it's learning the craft is the big thing.
Yeah, and there are so many ways to do that. I mean, not everybody can afford the time or the money to do a full master's degree. And I'm not sure that it's necessary. It was something that fit my life and my budget And I really wanted that structure for a longer period of time to really get my head into the craft. That's what I needed. That's not what everybody needs. And so there are so many ways to do it, and I love the advice that you're giving. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Julie, thank you so much. Thank you for the book that you wrote and the one that you're writing. What do you have any other topics that you plan to explore? I mean, you mentioned books that you had worked on before, but what's waiting out there that you want to get to in the future?
I have a rural Minnesota mystery that I'm working on that has dual timelines. So it's basically the main character in today's world is trying to solve a murder from 50 years ago. And so dual timelines where some of it's the character that was killed 50 years ago. So the reader meets the character, and then the contemporary woman who's working on it. And that's working through that. But that's something that I'd like to, and then I need to go back to my San Francisco cops and do a little work on that. I haven't read it for a while, and then I went back and read it. And it's like, oh God, I learned a lot since then. I gotta go fix that. So once
Oh
I
my
fix
God, I
that,
know.
then yeah, then I'll let my agent see if she can do something with it.
Thank you,
Okay,
Julie. It's been
you're welcome.
wonderful. Thank you for your book. I'm so excited about how the response that it's gotten, and I hope that thousands of people read this book. It's so well done.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for this the interview, for inviting me to the book club, because the book club is fabulous. There's so many amazing women or people in that book club. It's just mind-boggling.
Isn't it neat? What I mean,
It
it
is.
way exceeded my expectations. I was hoping to read with like 5 or 6 people, and my word, I've met
Yeah.
hundreds. I've met hundreds of people all over the world in
Yep.
all places in their aviation careers, all facets of aviation. It's been really fun. So yeah,
Yep. That's been
and so
great.
thank you for giving us a book to talk about this month. It's been wonderful.
Great.